that good? I wanted to do some big reveal like, I'm back. And then the chair didn't want to work with me. Anyway, for those people that follow my content, you will know that I have just taken a little break. In that time, however, I have managed to write 5 scripts and film 5 videos. So if you waited around for my return, thank you so much for coming back. I also have to give a special shout out to the followers that followed me from the Fairy Voice Mother. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but hello gorgeous. It does not sound right with me saying it. To those that followed me, thank you so much. To Lolly herself, thank you so much for letting your followers find me. And for those that don't know of the Fairy Voice Mother's content, please search that into the YouTube search bar and find my friend Lolly, who has the most exceptional content. If you love to sing, but you're unsure how to sing in the best way to optimize your voice, then the Fairy Voice Mother will guide you. And on the back of that, she is an absolute sweetheart and her videos are excellent to watch. Right, well, without further ado, let's get into today's content. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this. Today we are going to be talking about the case of Skylar Neese. This is a case that I hadn't heard of, and actually I probably should have done because it's a couple of years old now. But the reason as to why I found it was because I was searching true crime, as I always seem to do, and I stumbled across this very worrying status. So on social media, obviously you can put your statuses like having a cup of tea, having a cup of coffee. Well, these statuses were a lot more worrying. So once seeing those statuses, I felt like I had to investigate this case. Skylar Annette Neese was born on the 10th of February 1996 in Morgantown, West Virginia in the United States. Her parents were David and Mary Neese. Growing up, Skylar was very lively and a very fun child, and this actually continued into her years at schooling. She loved school and she loved learning, and there would be other children that, would be doing their studies and just completely want the day to end because they hated school. That wasn't Skylar. Skylar loved school. She really wanted one day to become a lawyer. And she was so focused in her studies that actually she got onto the honour roll in her school. Skylar loved to read, but she also loved to be very social, and in the 2nd grade she made a friend called Sheila Eddy. Sheila Eddy was also an only child, loved to be social and loved to go out. Skylar and Sheila clicked immediately with what they had in common. Sheila was born on the 29th of September 1995 and her parents are Tara and Greg Eddy. Sheila lived in Blacksville, which was 20 miles west of Morgantown, but despite this, Skylar and Sheila were close and would always hang out with one another. Sheila's life growing up was more difficult than Skylar's. Sheila came from an impoverished town and her parents struggled financially as her father, Greg, had been involved in a car accident that left him partially disabled and unable to work. In the year 2000, Greg and Tara would also divorce, which was hard on Sheila. One plus from the divorce, however, was that Tara would remarry, and she would then move herself, Sheila and her new husband to Morgantown, which meant that Sheila and Skylar could be closer together, which would only strengthen their friendship. They entered freshman year together in October 2010. Sheila's financial situation also changed when she moved because she could now afford all the things that she'd always wanted. Her new stepfather worked, and that meant more income for the family, and that also meant that Sheila could get things that she couldn't get when she was younger. In school, Sheila didn't naturally have a lot of friends. Skylar did, because she had always lived there, but Sheila was thrown right into the deep end of having to make friends. So it's said that Sheila used her sexuality to become popular amongst her peers. Sheila was part of the LGBTQ+ community, but I don't know exactly what her sexuality was, so I don't want to mention it to get that wrong. Skylar, as expected, fell immediately into her studies, but she always made time for her best friend Sheila. In high school, Skylar and Sheila were always together, and the two would soon become a three when they met Rachel Schoaf. Rachel was born on June the 10th, 1996. Her parents are Patricia Schoaf and Rusty Schoaf, and like Skylar and Sheila, she was an only child. Rachel was an aspiring actress/singer, and it is said that she was quite talented and could have gone very far in this career. When the group started hanging out together, they suddenly found a lot of fun in alcohol and smoking illegal substances and breaking curfews that their parents had given them. Sheila and Skylar's parents actually started seeing Rachel as a bad influence because before they had met Rachel, neither of the girls were interested in doing any illegal activity. It wasn't just their parents though. Friends in the school had also said that Rachel was troublesome. Skylar's cousin Kyle also referred to Rachel as a bad seed. Rachel was not the only one to blame. According to her other friends, Sheila's personality changed when she was with Rachel, so much so that her friends did not want to be around her as much. And Skylar's friends would often avoid Skylar because she was always with Sheila. Rachel was from a very religious background, and before she entered this high school, she attended St. Francis's Catholic school. Rachel found Sheila very interesting, and because Sheila was always available to hang out, Rachel and Sheila's friendship steamrolled. The more time they spent together, the closer they became. It's said that Rachel and Sheila started a relationship together, which for Rachel was incredibly exciting and something that she couldn't have ever had with any of her other religious friends. Although Skylar and Sheila were inseparable in elementary school, a somewhat competition began once they'd gained a third group member. Rachel was eager to be Sheila's best friend, and to do this, she decided that she would isolate Skylar. And now Skylar has been friends with Sheila for years, but she's realizing that this competition's going on, so she starts to distance herself from Rachel to put all of her effort into being best friends with Sheila. So Sheila knew this was happening, and she didn't stop the competitiveness between the girls because she actually really enjoyed the attention she was getting. So she didn't stop the fighting, and she would talk to Rachel about Skylar and Skylar about Rachel. So the feud between Rachel and Skylar carried on because Sheila didn't want to get involved and Rachel and Skylar did not want to talk to each other. In 2011, Skylar was put into a very awkward position at a sleepover party. Sheila and Rachel were getting very loud, very drunk, and they decided that at this party they would sleep together. Skylar was drinking too, but she did not get as drunk as Rachel and Sheila, who then proceeded to have, can I say this on YouTube? Sexual relations with one another. Skylar was incredibly uncomfortable, and the sleepover ended with Skylar and Sheila having a huge argument. This caused a divide between the pair, and problems only escalated from here. Rachel had been seen by others to be the person that broke up the friendship between Skylar and Sheila. However, Sheila was also said to have a dark side, and Sheila started to isolate Skylar to be closer to Rachel as well. Skylar started to feel complete and utterly unwanted. Sheila and Rachel started to even dress the same, and they both got boyfriends at the same time. Skylar, however, was not interested in a relationship and just wanted to focus on her schoolwork. It is said that Rachel and Sheila no longer wanted to be friends with Skylar, but they kept her around only because Skylar knew secrets about them. And it was awkward. Every time that Skylar would go out with the girls, it was very much like, you know when a parent is like, take your younger sibling with you type deal. And you don't really want that younger sibling there because it's more like child minding, and honestly they just become a bit of a nuisance because you'd rather be doing other things. Well, that is how they treated Skylar. She was like the younger sister that just had to come along. Skylar felt understandably upset by how they were treating her, so often she focused her attention to Twitter, where she would make cryptic posts and often argue publicly with Sheila and Rachel. In June 2012, things reached breaking point. Skylar and Sheila had taken a trip to Myrtle Beach and spent their entire week fighting. Skylar was considering that this was the end of their friendship. Rachel hadn't gone with them, and Skylar thought that maybe she and Sheila could rekindle their friendship, but this was not to be. Sheila, however, came home and reached the conclusion that Skylar had to die. At the end of 2011, it has since been reported that the girls were talking about the best way to dispose of a dead body. Fellow students and a teacher were actually witness to this conversation, but they didn't worry too much because actually a body had just been found behind the school grounds. So although quite a morbid conversation, no one thought this was out of place because of the recent events that have just happened at the school. Sadly, no one realised just how much of a red flag this was, considering what was coming next. On July the 5th, 2012, Skylar started her day as usual. She went and worked her normal shift at Wendy's, but later she would receive a text from Sheila and Rachel asking her to meet with them at midnight that night. Shocked by this, Skylar immediately jumped at the chance to hang out with Rachel and Sheila. They were also being really kind to her, which was unusual, so of course Skylar was definitely going to go out with them this evening. So after her shift at Wendy's, she returned home and then she would sneak out of her family apartment at 12:30 a.m. When she had got home from Wendy's, she actually pushed a bench underneath her window so that it would be easier later on to sneak out. Skylar lived on the ground floor, so the plan would be an easy one. When she left her apartment, she saw Sheila and Rachel waiting in a sedan parked close by. The three then drove to Pennsylvania. Once they were there, they got out of their car and began socializing together. Little did Skylar know, though, Sheila and Rachel had a plan. The whole night had been plotted and scheduled by Sheila and Rachel, and at a prearranged time, they stabbed Skylar to death. Sheila and Rachel really planned this murder out. So much so that in the back of Sheila's car, there was what was later deemed a serial killer kit. It consisted of a towel, bleach, a shovel, and a change of clothes for both the girls. In addition, they had packed multiple knives that they would use to kill Skylar. Both girls wore hooded sweatshirts whilst they stabbed her. Their plan was to kill Skylar, dispose of her body, and then head back home as if nothing had happened. Rachel and Sheila knew they had to hide Skylar's body, but they started digging and they kept digging, but the hole that they made was not big enough to cover Skylar, so they then decided to cover her with twigs and branches and leave her there. And after this, Rachel and Sheila returned home. The next morning, David, Skylar's dad, had decided to go and check on her as he hadn't heard from her since the night before. But when he went to her bedroom, he found her bed empty. He had also clocked that her bed was made, so she hadn't slept in it. He investigated further and found that her window screen was in her wardrobe and that a bench had been pushed up against her window. It was in this moment that he worked out that she'd snuck out the night before. He's also been quoted, so I'll add that now. Then I knew she snuck out last night, and then, oh my God, she snuck out last night and she's not home. Her parents were worried sick, but they knew something was truly wrong when she hadn't turned up for work that day. She had never missed a shift before this, and this was completely out of character for her. Her parents called the police and declared her missing. And later that day, if you can believe it, Sheila actually phoned Skylar's parents to tell them what had happened the night before. And when I say happened, I mean what had happened the night before. She proceeded to tell me that her, Skylar, and Rachel had snuck out the night before and that they had driven around Star City. They were getting high and that the two girls had dropped her off back at the house. The story was that they had dropped her off at the end of the road because she didn't want to wake us up by sneaking back in. Sheila said that her and Rachel had picked up Skylar about 11 p.m. and dropped her off before midnight. On the apartment surveillance footage at 12:30 a.m, a car is seen to be pulling up, and the next thing that is seen is that Skylar is sneaking out and getting into that car. The car then drives off. On the 7th of July, Sheila and Sheila's mum would help the Skylar family to try and find Skylar. The arrogance of this is absolutely sickening. It makes me really angry. The killer is right there, and she's acting like a concerned best friend. It's just absolutely horrendous that Sheila felt that she could get away with this and just act like such a kind, considerate friend in this moment. The family is going through hell. I can't get my head around it. Rachel, at the same time, had left to go to a Catholic summer camp for 2 weeks. 2 days after July the 7th was when the public was alerted that Skylar had gone missing. Weeks had passed, and the police had come to the conclusion that Skylar had gone to a house party and overdosed. They also then believed that those at the house party disposed of her body out of fear. Jessica Colbank, who was working on the case, found Sheila Eddy's demeanour really suspicious. She said, and I'll quote and I'll pop that on the screen now, "Just a complete blank on emotions, and there was absolutely nothing. It was like iced over." Colbank also thought that Rachel was very nervous when she first spoke to her. Their stories were the same. No one's story is ever exactly the same unless it's rehearsed. Everything in my gut was Sheila is acting wrong and Rachel is scared to death. The police then looked at phone records and they re-looked at the surveillance camera, and they found out then that Rachel and Sheila were lying in their statements. The police then told Skylar's parents that they were now incredibly suspicious of Sheila and Rachel. The police also told this to their classmates, which then caused the classmates to put a lot of pressure on Sheila and Rachel to tell the truth. On the 28th of December 2012, Rachel had a nervous breakdown. It was so severe that Rachel was put in a psychiatric hospital with no communication allowed. When she was discharged from hospital, Rachel immediately spoke to her attorney and confessed to the murder of Skylar Neese. This was on the 3rd of January 2013. She told them everything, and she also told them of Sheila's involvement. The police then realised that they could get a lot out of Rachel, so they offered her a deal if she confessed to every little detail within the murder. She took police to Skylar's body and also planned to speak to Sheila on the phone whilst using a microphone, but Sheila was aware that something was wrong and did not incriminate herself. The police then searched Sheila's car and found blood that matched Skylar. This was enough to then arrest Rachel and Sheila for the killing. When asked why they killed her, the response was, "We just didn't like her." They no longer wanted to be friends with her, and that was their entire motive behind taking Skylar's life. Rachel turned herself in, and Sheila was arrested in a restaurant parking lot. Due to the deal made with the police, Rachel got 30 years for the crime. Sheila got life in prison with the possibility of parole in 15 years. They're both sickos, and they're both exactly where they need to be, away from civilization, locked up like animals. Because that's what they are. They're animals. In memory of their daughter, Dave and Mary Neese helped pass Skylar's Law in West Virginia. It is a law that requires Amber Alerts for all missing children, not just those that are believed to have been kidnapped. To honour their daughter, Dave and Mary transformed the site of her murder into a memorial. Dave often makes the 20-mile drive. Something horrible happened here, but I want to take the horrible thing that happened here and try to turn it into something good. A place that people can come and remember Skylar, and remember the good little girl that she was, and not the little beast that they treated her like. So that was the case of Skylar Neese. And I think it's so incredibly sad. I mean, I say this every time, but there is not a true crime story that isn't sad. I remember not wanting to be friends with people and just not talking to them anymore. I think when I was bullied by an old friend of mine, I actually asked to change classes. There is so much you can do to avoid people. The lengths in which they went to get Skylar out of their lives is just horrific. And it's something that Dave and Mary will never get over. Skylar's other friends will never get over. And Skylar was so bright, such a nice girl, and she was going to be a lawyer. And it's just devastating that that will never happen for her because of Rachel and Sheila. The other thing about this that really irritates me is I can't remember what they're called in this moment, but the police photos that are taken of you when you're in prison, of Rachel and Sheila, and they're smiling. It's said that Sheila, since the crime, has, been really apologetic about it, and she cried in court, etc. And Sheila has never really shown any emotion, that she's, sad about what she's done or regrets what she's done. I don't know how you could do this to anyone, and it blows my mind. It mystifies me because their brain chemistry is completely opposing to mine. They had planned this. They had really, really thought about it. It's horrible. It's horrific. I guess the only good to come out of this, there is nothing good, but they've taken Skylar's life and they've also lost their own. My feelings go to Dave and Mary, who have to now live without seeing Skylar grow up, and that is just heartbreaking. And I feel for all of her friends and other family that are affected by this case. In nicer news though, I just want to thank all the people that have consistently watched my videos and consistently been there as soon as I upload anything. I'm going to try and put your names here, and if that doesn't work, then I'll put it on a next slide, but I just want to give a tiny bit of thanks to you because you're always there. There is some key people whose names are either around here or on the next slide that I'm so thankful for. You're always first on a video, you're very supportive, and you've been incredibly kind about the little break that I took. So thank you for being you. I hope you have an extra special weekend, and I love your support. Thank you. But for now, that is all from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.